What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 427 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Drew Dinkmeyer to talk NBA Cup final as the Bucks and Darvin Ham and Taurean Prince 14-0 in the Cup game. Shout out to them. Never take that away from Darvin Ham. So excited to break this down. We'll talk about what we learned and what we might learn as the Milwaukee Bucks certainly made a loud statement with the way they won here. With me to do so again, Drew Dinkmeyer. Dink, how's it going?
It's good. I will miss the Emirates NBA Cup and our corporate overlords at Emirates influencing the early part of the NBA season. But I enjoyed the Cup. I enjoy seeing a little bit extra competitiveness, seeing the players kind of fight for something. I think it's a great way and great start to the season in terms of giving some of these younger teams that might not be able to sustain success over the course of the full season the opportunity to find a pocket where they're playing really well. I think we almost saw that with Detroit when they almost got into the Cup bracket round. So I think it's a great event that the NBA is transitioning to. I know there's a lot of feedback on the event itself from NBA Twitter and whatnot, but it's going to take time for this to build into something more meaningful. Like things don't happen in the first 2 years of a new thing. People getting really excited about them. But I think when we look back, 15, 20 years from now, and we see Giannis Antetokounmpo and LeBron James with NBA in-season tournament Cup champions and MVPs on their resume, I think it's going to mean a little something. So I'm grateful for having this kind of early season, I don't want to say distraction, but differentiation in terms of motivation and watching competitive games. And I thought in general the NBA Emirates Cup Season 2 was a success.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of talk about the logistics of it. Obviously OKC having that Thursday, Friday back-to-back in Florida after playing on Tuesday, going for the Cup. That's a topic. Do they have to make it a bigger push? I know people are talking about doing it later in the season. Maybe do it like just to end the first half and then you have All-Star break or something. Like, I don't know. They can figure that all out. The Vegas people are talking about the Vegas crowd not being as pumped up, being a little bit quiet. I don't really care about that. I think Vegas is cool. I love going there for summer league, so I don't have any complaints. I thought everything was great and just covered really well. And then shout out to the Bucks. No champagne. They didn't party up after getting the win. Giannis had the job's not finished quote a la Kobe Bryant. So let's start with Giannis. Just a complete masterclass of a basketball game from him. Goes 26, 19, and 10. They didn't have potential assist data yet, but he had 19 potential assists 2 games ago against the Hawks, and he had at least 10. He had plenty. I would say he probably had 16, 17. He was unbelievably great passing out of those double teams, and obviously the rim presence was great. Actually had no transition points all game for the first time this season. No transition, pretty crazy. So he played great. Again, made his no one talks about Giannis being in the MVP talk, justifiably so, but he made it pretty clear he is an MVP caliber player. What do you make of Giannis? Not only this game, but this run up into the Cup and how the Bucks, as the clear centerpiece, as great as Dame is, he is the man.
Yeah, he remains just such a unique problem to deal with. One of the things that we've talked about with Oklahoma City's defense during the course of the season is just how they've sort of been able to swallow up a lot of teams' main primary scorers. And a lot of the guys that are the main primary scorers in the NBA right now are guards. And Giannis is just a different animal. When you look at in terms of big driving power wings in the NBA now, that's LeBron James mold. And there's just not many other players that have followed in that mold since. You could argue, Jason Tatum has kind of followed more of the Kevin Durant path in terms of using size and strength to create space for jump shooting, not as much kind of downhill attacking and what that does to break down defenses. Obviously, the Celtics are able to break down defenses in their own way from touching the paint and the floor spread shooting that they have. But I think Giannis was just throughout the tournament, just a dominant force in terms of his ability to get downhill, to challenge the rim, to put pressure on defenses, and to break down the best defense in the league and what OKC has been in a way that other opponents have been unable to, because they've been unable to power their way through this Oklahoma City defense that has length and athleticism and quick hands. And Giannis is just too big, too fast, too strong. And there's just not a lot of other guys that can pose that kind of threat to Oklahoma City's defense. So it was really interesting to see his game on display in the ways that it really kind of tested the best defense in the league.
Mhm, for sure. I want to talk about that. We'll talk more Giannis when we get to big picture stuff. But the other headline is quite obvious. The OKC shooting luck was as bad as possible. 5 of 32 from three. They were buried early. I think they were 2 of 20. I think they were 1 of 17 earlier than that. And I looked at the information here. Unguarded, 1 of 16, 1 of 15, excuse me, 1 of 15 on unguarded threes, 1 of 6 unguarded threes. These are catch and shoots. So I had a couple dribble jumpers as well. Oh man, anything to this, or this is just like a classic bad night? I think it's just classic bad night. Again, 1 of 15 unguarded. Like
Yeah.
they were really good last year. They were first in 3-point free uh, uh, percentage last year, middle of the pack this year, so a little bit of a dip. But do you make anything of this, or is just OKC just having a really bad shooting night?
I think unfortunately for OKC, they're a team that's on the rise, that's wanting the respect, wanting to be treated as one of the best teams in the league. And, from the national media perspective, because they're a smaller market, because they're in the middle of the country, they don't fit one of the East Coast, West Coast time frames that you can flex national games into a lot. I think they get a little bit undercovered. And I think unfortunately that's probably going to remain the case after this performance. I think people are going to, oftentimes the national folks have used kind of poor shooting games to make big extrapolations about a team's future, right? We saw this most famously with Charles Barkley and the TNT guys, ridiculing the Golden State Warriors in terms of their long-term ability to be sustaining success with the dependence on the three-point shot. And look, when the 3-point shot goes really, really bad, when you shoot 5 for 32 and you shoot sub 20% from the field, it obviously looks like you have limitations offensively. I don't think those limitations are any long-term concern to have. I think it's just, probably the worst shooting game we'll see from them all season. It just happened to come in a game with some stakes, and that's unfortunate for Oklahoma City. Not unfortunate for, fantasy folks, because this game didn't count anywhere. So it does not exist in the stat bucket. But unfortunately for OKC, they didn't shoot the ball well last night, and I think people will probably use that as some sort of referendum on OKC's likelihood of being a title contender, and I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, 100%. Just some other stats to back up, how they won like every other thing besides the shooting stuff. 0.55 on spot ups, their worst of the season. They won the transition possession game, 21-14. They had more steals, they had more turnovers forced. Great. They won the paint battle by a lot, 34-18. They were 17 of 38 in the paint, weren't efficient there. They basically drew even on the second chance points, 9-7. Only lost offensive rebounds by a little bit. Like, they should have. I mean, obviously, like if they shot decent, if they made 6 more threes, they would have won and been about where they were. So, I mean, it's really just that. Credit to Doc Rivers for sure for making kind of the iffy-ish players kind of beat them. But like, I mean, Isaiah Joe 1 of 6, all
Yep.
good looks. Ludort, who's been great all year, 0 of 4. SGA had a lot of dribble stuff that was kind of tough, but he missed a lot of like bunnies, which I guess we could transition to there. Man, he was bad. Worst half court efficiency, worst total efficiency. One of his worst isolation games of the season. One of his worst jumpers. It was his worst game of the season and worst game I've seen him play. I was talking to Sam. I was like, this may have been the worst like star SGA game I've ever seen. Like he's had some kind of iffy ones, but considering the stakes of the game, it was a bad game. And the guy is just so consistent. I think he led the league in 30-point games last year. This night after night, you're getting 30 out of SGA. And how much of that is Ajax? And is it just like, I thought the looks were pretty good. So I think this is just like bad, missing those threes and you get a bad SGA game. The fact that this game was like even like pretty close is just really a testament to how great OKC's defense is. And should note they held the Bucks to their half court of 31 percentile when they've been pretty good. So the Bucks half court offense wasn't very good. It was just missed shots and poor SGA. So anything to SGA, like you can't put the not enough playoff experience stuff. I'm not doing that. This dude's a killer. So do you pretty much agree there?
No, I think he played poorly, but I do think we need to give credit to Andre Jackson Jr.,
Yep.
who is developing into a really solid defensive piece. That if he can develop a level of offensive reliability in terms of what he brings to the table. You're looking at a potential long-term starter fit next to this kind of core group of veteran players for Milwaukee, which they really needed. So we'll talk about that more in terms of what this means for the future for Milwaukee. But thought he did an excellent job staying in front of SGA, making SGA kind of shoot contested shots. And most of the time, SGA is going to make those contested shots with great players.
Mhm.
You often are not the sole responsibility in terms of shutting them down. You're just trying to make it as difficult as possible. And I thought Andre Jackson Jr. did a good job at making things
Mhm.
difficult for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But no, it's not a referendum on his ability in big games or anything like that. I think if anything, if you're an OKC fan, you kind of are like, you know what, not the worst thing in the world to happen to
Mhm.
face kind of that stage with the stakes what they were, but not the biggest of stakes, and have SGA have some struggle. Just in terms of like get that out of the way, and let's be ready come playoff time. But I don't think there's any reason to worry about SGA long term.
Yeah, and he didn't. Credit to Andre Jackson. They pressed him full court a lot, and Mark Dagnall
Yep.
talked about that they play like that all the time. And he brought up two interesting names that do that. After the game, he mentioned Dylan Brooks and Herb Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's comparing Andre Jackson to Herb Jones and Dylan Brooks. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. So, yeah, major like obviously Giannis SGA being bad, but Andre Jackson being a thing, I think is something. I don't know if there's anything to that. He's been extraordinarily inconsistent. His foul rate's down a little bit this year, which is a positive. He fouled a ton last year, so that's great. So yeah, anything like is Andre Jackson? I'm curious, like if Middleton did play, and shout out to me for being on that probable tag, being really shady, but like, can Andre have some consistency? That would go a really, really long way. Because, I mean, how many DFS shows, how every matchup's calling out right about how bad the Milwaukee on-ball defense is. If Andre Jackson could be like decent or like good, that's like a really big game changer. Because having an on-ball defender of that caliber with the drop coverage that they run, not as much as they ran it at peak times, but that's really valuable. So I don't know, anything you want to add on Andre, and just I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but him and any other role players that kind of stepped up. It's just one more point too. Just no Middleton. They just handed the whole offense to Giannis. Just
Yeah.
completely killed them on the doubles, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's a good transition point to talk about like kind of what this tournament means for these two teams in terms of moving forward. And I think there's more conclusions to draw on the Buck side, or more questions to try to answer on the Buck side than there are on the Thunder side. I think in general with the Oklahoma City Thunder, we've been touting them as title contenders since the beginning of the season. They had a great offseason. They're still playing without Chet Holmgren, arguably their second, third most important player. So I think there's really no long term concerns about OKC and what this means in terms of this tournament for them. But I think this was kind of a landmark tournament, and Doc Rivers has talked a lot about it in terms of it being a point of refocus and reattention for the Milwaukee Bucks after a really slow start to the season. They finished things off here, as you mentioned, without Chris Middleton. I think there's been some concerns in terms of the depth of this team and what this team is without like Chris Middleton's health, which has been questionable in recent years. And I think what we saw is the trio of Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez still offers a really strong foundation. And the question has been in recent years, how can Milwaukee kind of fill out the rest of the roster? And the idea was, okay, you got Chris Middleton, you got Bobby Portis, and we've got five guys that we feel like pretty good about. Bobby Portis has his limitations defensively. They've kind of figured out that playing him less alongside Brook is helping their defense a little bit more, and still getting the offensive production from the center position that they kind of need in terms of the floor spacing and the shooting. And so what they've really been lacking in terms of the fit is perimeter point of attack defense. And they tried to address that this offseason with the acquisitions of Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince. But really, what we're seeing is the development of Andre Jackson Jr. and AJ Green are giving them more bulk in numbers to attack this hole in the roster build than they ever had before. And so, yeah, I think it's huge to get the development from Andre Jackson Jr. because I think Taurean Prince is going to have his limitations. He's a 10-year vet in the league. There's not going to get a lot of growth out of that situation. And they haven't had draft picks to really be able to like infuse young talent into this team because of the Damian Lillard trade, to be able to try to like have something develop. So seeing what they've gotten from Andre Jackson in terms of on-ball defense, from AJ Green, whose shot has always been wet. It's been more of a question mark of, can he stay on the floor defensively? Can he do things outside of just hitting open shots? Can he kind of graduate from the path that we saw like Sam Merrill take, former Milwaukee Buck, now with Cleveland, in terms of, can you turn into more than just a shooter? And I think AJ Green's making strides there. So Andre Jackson to me was kind of the headline of what this means for the future for Milwaukee, in the sense that, like, hey, you have a legit point of attack defender in the mix now. We're not just can we outscore you team, which I think was the concern with Milwaukee since the trade of Drew Holiday. Is now are we shifting so much of the weight towards the offensive side when you've got Damian Lillard, you've got Bobby Portis, you've got Chris Middleton, all players who have some defensive limitations that you're relying heavily on. How much of this defense can you put on Brook Lopez as he gets into his mid to late 30s? How much of this defense can you continue to put on Giannis Antetokounmpo when he's carrying all this offense? And I think getting another piece to help kind of anchor the defense that can maybe, grow into a 30-minute a night role, I think is really encouraging for them. So I think Andre Jackson Jr.'s performance, especially on the biggest stage against the toughest, if not the toughest, one of the toughest guards that he'll have all season long, I think was really encouraging for the ultimate future of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, 2 fouls with the way SGA draws him. That was pretty. They let him play though. That was another like kind of big picture takeaway. They weren't calling anything out there, which is certainly tough for SGA as he draws fouls. But and then Dame, hit a crazy corner three, fading away. Hit for 3 free throws, had 6 transition points. We knew he was going to have a bad game. Under barely hit, thank you. Under 23.5, scores 23 points. But yeah, Dame's going to Dame. Like, no concerns there. It was mildly interesting. He subbed out before the other garbage time subs. Talked about that calf thing. I wonder if that's going to be something to watch in the future, and if he would have played in like a regular season game there. So, but yeah, definitely. And AJ Green's also been really good. Hit some big shots as well. He's been pretty good defensively. He can handle like those smaller guards. They've been asking him to guard like the slashing guys. I don't know if he's guarded Maxey, but that kind of a player. They've been comfortable with him on switches and stuff in their scheme. So, yeah, I guess the last thing I would note, they're gonna start Middleton eventually. Is it just Middleton taking Taurean Prince's job now? Because we always kind of assumed it might be Andre. I don't know. I kind of feel like I think the Bucks are at their best if Andre Jackson could stay in the starting lineup.
I think that's right. I also think it's going to take some time for Middleton to earn that role. So I think we're going to have some time to figure that out, and maybe injuries, have a way of kind of solving some of these problems at some points. But I think that's the direction that we're heading right now, which is ultimately like with Andre Jackson Jr. out there, if you are surrounding him by Giannis and Dame and Middleton and Brook, that's a lot of offense. That's a lot of floor spacing. There's a lot of room for Andre Jackson to kind of maneuver and still be a point of attack defender. And then, conversely on the defensive side of the ball, if you're trying to have, Chris Middleton or Taurean Prince essentially be your two, there's going to be some really tough matchups out there for them in terms of quickness and lateral agility. That's going to put a lot of pressure on them that wouldn't put the same amount of pressure on Andre Jackson Jr. So I think kind of naturally it just makes sense that way, that you have him as your kind of lead guard defender. You can maybe in those smaller iterations of lineups also kind of hide Dame on a non-offensive threat in some cases, and I think that'll be the approach going forward. So yeah, I think Taurean Prince, whose minutes have been down pretty consistently over the last month, even though to Taurean Prince's credit, he continues to shoot the ball great. So it's not like he's playing himself out of these minutes. I think in a lot of ways, there's other people that are earning these minutes just at his expense.
For sure. So let's change gears to the OKC. Yeah, I mean, just nobody really played well. The only guy I think that played well was Isaiah Hartenstein. He was off and running, hit that float game going. They were really living and dying by that. J-Dub was not good defensively. That switch stuff they were running with Dort wasn't good either. Dort missed all 4 of his threes, as I mentioned. And then the last point here, Isaiah Joe started, which was a surprise. Mark Dagnall said after the game that they thought that Chris Middleton was going to play, and that news came pretty early. So I don't know if I believe him, A. And then B, like, we've seen them all the time switch the matchups in the second half. So I don't know if I believe him. He said that they were kind of still exploring Kaysen as like a consistent starter, that they had settled in with him there, and he had been settled in really since Hartenstein kind of got up to speed. They were really running it out there. But yeah, iffy game from Kaysen. I thought Kaysen was fine. Definitely not. If you're playing the blame game, he'd be pretty low there. Caruso was good defensively, had a couple pretty strong defensive plays, some steals. He had one of the biggest plays against him. That Giannis block on him under the basket was just pretty much lights out for OKC. So yeah, there's that, and then there's the bad shooting. Obviously, it's trade season. The Cam Johnson's name comes to mind. Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't think you really need
Yeah.
him. So anything, they've got just on ammo on top of ammo on top of ammo with these draft
Yep.
picks. And Topic, maybe they could probably get a ton for him. So yeah, thoughts on just the performance of these guys, and then looking forward, what they can do to be, besides get Chet back, what they could, they missed, and one more point, they missed Chet, right? Like we talked about the lack of
Yes.
size. J-Dub gave up a lot of size. Dort gave up size. They just
Yep.
shut down Luka. They shut down guards. I talked about this every single day they play. Like, okay, don't play guard overs against OKC because they're going to shut them down. So they missed their size. But yeah, anything on just getting Chet back, and then the players they have, then players they could get.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've learned from Sam Presti is they've been patient, they've been tactical with the types of players that they've tried to add around this core. I think Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso were very, very tactical additions around this core. So I think if they're going to make any adjustments to try to improve this roster, I think you're very likely to see it on the scales of kind of big wing shooter, is where you'd look and you'd say like, okay, against kind of the biggest wings, we might be a little bit vulnerable on that side in terms of getting some more size out there, playing some jumbo type lineups. I think they wanted to experiment with some of that stuff with Chet at the 4 and Hartenstein at the 5, but we just haven't had those two players healthy at the same time together to really experiment with that stuff. I know that they are generally very cautious in terms of how they approach the trade deadline, right? They added Gordon Hayward last year. They take their time trying to get him into the mix, and it never really fit. And they kind of looked at that in the past as like, hey, like maybe we made a mistake there. So I don't know if they'll necessarily be aggressive at the deadline, but I know that generally they've been pretty tactical on that front. I think if they could make a move for someone like Cam Johnson, that would make a ton of sense in terms of a fit. I'm sure his price will be very, very expensive. Dorian Finney-Smith, I think the challenge for them right now is their roster is so deep and they have so many assets that if you're going to add somebody, you want it to be like a very clear rotation piece. You don't want to like muddy the waters anymore. And I think that's where they missed with Gordon Hayward last year, is he wasn't like clearly better than a lot of their bench options. And it kind of made things a little bit chaotic for Hayward's transition. So I'm not sure if they'll be super active or not. I don't think they have to. I think they certainly have an opportunity to, like, if they were to add a Cam Johnson, you look at this core and it's like, man, that's the next 3-4 years are going to be real tough to try to beat this team. But they're certainly not, J-Dub and SGA are solid shooters. Dort has transformed himself into a much better shooter. I don't know that I sit there in a playoff series and go like, okay, I know Dort's going to knock him down at a 40% clip. I don't think he's earned that level, even though he shot the ball at that level the last 2 years. I don't feel that level of confidence. And so maybe if they could find somebody that you feel like is that guy's a 40% shooter in his sleep, I think that would add something. But no, I don't think there should be any sense of urgency after this performance or anything like that to try to shuffle things around. I do think, I think they're blessed with like really good dudes on this team that all are kind of in it together. So I don't think this will be an issue. But I thought it was kind of weird for Dagnall. They've had so much success playing so well with Cason Wallace starting. And I understand the matchup stuff that he was trying to get at in terms of protecting their switches and different things like that Isaiah Joe helps with. But I just wouldn't have messed with a good thing running in that instance. And obviously we have the benefit of hindsight being 2020 here to critique the move. But it's one that I do wonder, Isaiah Joe was not in a rhythm to start that game, did not knock down the open
first play of the game was
first play of the game.
Play.
Yeah.
Yep.
They ran the first play of the game, the dribble handoff to Hartenstein to get him that above the break three. And, he in and out. And from there, I mean, he just, they were trying to get him in rhythm early. But, you could second guess that. I think the good news for them, though, is they've got a lot of great dudes on this team who seem to really emphasize team first. So I don't think it's going to have any sort of rift or anything like that. By all accounts, Cason is just like an exceptional teammate. So a little bit of critique on there that I wouldn't have messed up, a good thing running, but they've had a lot of success kind of mixing and matching for matchups in the past. So
Yeah, one thing I'll add to, no big Jalen Williams. They could use him yesterday
For sure.
as well.
Just
So
more
yeah,
size in general, and yeah, just more size in general. Which look, they're missing two centers that they have
yep,
on their roster. That were one that's one of their best players, and one that was like a fringe rotation piece to use in these type of spots. So
yeah,
they're just shorthanded.
and I mean Aaron Wiggins and Usman Jang. Maybe some teams want to try to get them. Wiggins on a pretty
Yeah.
good contract. Wiggins has really been cut down. So last question. The where do we stand? I don't think we need to have a conversation. OKC, they're still the best in the West, right? Like period.
Yes.
Okay. And then what about the Bucks now? Where are they at? Are they're not I don't think they're in the Cleveland Boston tier. Obviously Boston on top, but are they in that New York Orlando tier? I think quite firmly I would say yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're in
They're
that
at the top of it
tier.
then.
Yeah, I think they're in that tier for sure. I'm still kind of counting Cleveland in that tier personally.
Man, hating
I
on the best
still
offense in the NBA.
maybe it's hating, maybe it is. I just want to see it, do it in the playoffs.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think Boston's separated, but I think Milwaukee's played really well for an extended stretch now, and I think they're starting to sort out and get some secondary production from these reserves that they needed to get. Gary Trent Jr. started shooting the ball better. He was 3 for 6 in this one,
Mhm.
I think. AJ Green shooting the ball better. I think things are starting to look up on Milwaukee. The big question mark is like, can Giannis hold up playing this much?
Mhm.
We need to get to a point where Middleton is playing enough that they can scale Giannis back down a little bit and have some of these rest games for Giannis, where it's Middleton and Dame kind of taking over things. I think the fortunate part of playing in the East is you get a lot of those games on your schedule that you're able to work your way through that. But that's my only concern, is that Giannis has been pushed quite a bit early in the season.
Yeah, for sure. That was always the concern. We get that consistent P tag. I accidentally just looked up. I went to go look at the ratings. I pulled up the clutch stats. The Cavs are plus 52.5 in the clutch net rating. So they've been
Yep.
great. All right. Yeah, they've been awesome. That'll be a pod for another day. Perhaps next week we'll be back after Christmas to talk. Anything else to get us out of here?
Now, as always, appreciate those of you consuming our content on the free side. If you're listening via podcast form, please check out our YouTube channel, Established Run NBA, over on YouTube. You can find the video edition of these if you'd like to look at myself and Mike Gallagher as we talk through these. Mike currently sitting with the background in the Emirates jet. You're missing that out on for the audio only listeners. So check us out there. If you're interested in any of the premium content, you can go to establishedrun.com/subscribe-MBA. We will have more details on holiday discounts that usually come around the Christmas time and the Christmas slate. So we'll have more details on those next week. Look for those on our socials. And as always, just appreciate your guys' support as we head into this holiday season. Hope everyone has a happy and healthy holiday season.
Yep, excited for it. A fun Christmas slate without the OKC Thunder, without the Bucks. Sad. All right, appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys next time.